I expected a polite graduation dinner, just a fake hug and quiet toasts. Instead, my sister smashed my face into the cake for a viral prank. My family laughed, warning me not to make a scene, but I tasted blood mixed with frosting. By morning, the emergency room doctor was not laughing. He looked at my scans and called 911. He did not see a clumsy fall. He saw a crime written on my bones. My name is Alexis Ruiz, and I had just spent the last 4 years of my life bleeding spreadsheet logic and supply chain theory to earn a master's degree from East Bay Graduate Institute. It was a piece of paper that proved I could manage complex logistics, predict market failures, and streamline chaos. Yet, as I sat at the head of the table in Cedar and Salt, the most pretentious seafood restaurant in Ashford, Rhode Island, I realized I could not manage the one volatile variable that had defined my entire existence: my sister, Mallory. To the casual observer, our table looked like the epitome of the American dream. My father, Graham, was wearing his navy blazer, the one he saved for occasions where he needed to look successful but approachable. My mother, Lucinda, was glowing in a shade of peach that she insisted made her look 10 years younger. And then there was Mallory, only 18 months older than me but commanding the room as if she were the sun, and we were merely planets grateful for her gravity. "Oh, look at her," Mallory squealed, holding up her phone to capture a video of me holding my menu. "The graduate! Finally done with school at 32? Better late than never. Right, Lexi?" She laughed. It was a bright, infectious sound that made strangers at nearby tables smile at us. They saw a supportive big sister teasing her sibling. They did not see the dig. They did not hear the subtext that suggested my timeline was a failure rather than a result of working 2 jobs to pay my own tuition. "Thank you, Mal," I said, forcing the corners of my mouth up. I was the family diplomat, the peacekeeper, the sponge that absorbed the tension so that Mom could pretend we were perfect and Dad could eat his dinner without indigestion. I had been doing it since I was 6 years old. If Mallory broke a vase, I was the one who swept up the glass so she would not get cut. If Mallory screamed until her throat was raw, I was the one who whispered apologies to the neighbors. "Let's order the champagne," my father announced, looking around the room to ensure people noticed we were celebrating. "The good stuff, $80 a bottle." "Graham, keep your voice down," my mother hissed, though she adjusted her necklace, clearly pleased. "But yes, Alexis deserves it." The waiter, a young man with tired eyes, approached our table. Mallory immediately charmed him, leaning in just enough to invade his personal space, making him flush. She ordered for the table before I could speak, picking the appetizers she liked, the wine she wanted. I let her. It was easier than the alternative. However, the air at the table shifted when the conversation turned from the superficial to the specific. "So," Mallory said, swirling her wine glass, her eyes locking onto mine with a predator's focus, "now that you are officially a master of the universe, or whatever that degree is, do you think you will finally have time to stop by the lawyer's office? The paperwork for the lake lot is sitting there gathering dust." My stomach tightened. This was the real reason for the tension humming beneath her skin. Our grandmother had passed away 6 months ago, leaving a prime piece of lakefront property to the family. But in a move that shocked everyone, she had designated me as the final signatory for any transfer or sale. Not my father, not Mallory, me. Mallory wanted to sell it immediately to a developer who was offering a ridiculous sum. I wanted to wait. The market was fluctuating, and honestly, Grandma had loved that land. I was not ready to see it turned into condos. "I will get to it, Mal," I said, keeping my voice even. "I just finished my thesis 3 days ago. I haven't even slept a full 8 hours yet." "It is just a signature." "Alexis," Mallory said, her voice dropping an octave, losing its performative sweetness. "You are holding up everyone's payout because you want to feel important. Control freak much?" "Mallory," my mother warned, but it was weak. It was the same tone she used when the dog barked at the mailman. A noise, not a command. "I am not holding anything up," I replied, feeling a rare spark of defiance. "I am doing what Grandma asked. She wanted me to review the terms." Mallory smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She stood up, coming around the table to wrap her arm around my shoulders. To the restaurant. It looked like a hug. She squeezed me, her nails digging into the fabric of my dress, pressing just hard enough to hurt. "Smile for the story," she whispered into my ear, her breath smelling of expensive Chardonnay. Then, in a voice only I could hear, she added, "Do not think this degree makes you special. Lexi, you are still just the little sister who needs us to survive. Sign the papers, or you will regret making me wait." She pulled back instantly, flashing a dazzling smile at her phone camera. "Say master's degree?" I smiled. I always smiled. I felt the familiar weight of submission settling in my chest. It was the role I had been cast in since birth. Alexis, the sturdy one. Alexis, the one who takes the high road. Alexis, who never makes a scene. Okay, sit down, Mal," my father said, looking at his watch. "The food is coming." Dinner was a blur of forced conversation. I answered questions about supply chains and logistics, watching my parents' eyes glaze over. They did not care about the work. They cared about the title. They cared that they could tell their friends at the club that their daughter was a master of science. It was currency to them. I kept glancing at Mallory. She was manic, typing furiously on her phone, then engaging the table with loud anecdotes about her job in marketing, effectively drowning out my moment. She told a story about a client who had tripped at a gala, mimicking the way the woman had fallen. My parents laughed. I took a long sip of water. Then, the lights in the restaurant dimmed slightly. The manager gave a subtle signal. I saw the kitchen doors swing open. A cart was wheeled out, bearing a massive 3-tier chocolate cake. It was beautiful, decadent, with gold cursive lettering that read, "Congrats Alexis," shimmering under the ambient lights. The waiter began to steer the cart toward us. A professional smile plastered on his face. "Stop!" Mallory's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. The waiter froze. The entire section of the restaurant looked over. Mallory stood up, smoothing her dress. She walked over to the cart, intercepting the waiter. "I will take it from here," she declared, her voice projecting to the back of the room. "I want to bring it to my sister myself. It is a big moment. It has to be perfect." "Ma'am, it is quite heavy," the waiter cautioned, his hands hovering nervously near the silver tray. "The base is—" "I got it," she snapped, then immediately softened into a giggle for the audience watching her. "I go to the gym. I can handle a cake. Go on. Shoo." My mother clapped her hands together softly. "Oh, look at her. She just wants to make it special for you. Alexis." "Yeah," my father grunted. Approvingly. "That is a nice touch." I watched Mallory lift the heavy cake stand. Her arms strained slightly, the muscles distinct. She looked at me across the tables, a distance of perhaps 15 feet. There was a look on her face that I could not quite parse. It was excitement, yes, but it was edged with something darker. Adrenaline? Malice? "Ready or not, here comes the graduation surprise," Mallory announced. She began to walk toward me. The gold lettering on the cake caught the light. "Congrats. Alexis." I sat up straighter, preparing to feign surprise, preparing to be grateful, preparing to be the good sister one more time. I had no idea that in less than 60 seconds, the concept of keeping the peace would be obliterated forever. I just watched her come closer, step by step, the sugar and flour trembling in her hands, a weapon disguised as a celebration. The cake sat before me like a sugary monument to a success I was not allowed to fully own. The air around our table felt pressurized, the way the atmosphere thickens right before a thunderstorm breaks. Mallory did not return to her seat. Instead, she hovered behind me, her presence radiating a heat that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Scooch in," she commanded, her voice bright and loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "We need to document this. The ruin of the diet. The beginning of the rest of your life. I shifted in my chair, turning slightly to accommodate her. I could smell her perfume, something floral and sharp that masked the scent of the seafood and the chocolate. She leaned down, wrapping an arm around my neck. It was not a hug, it was a vice. Her forearm pressed against my windpipe just hard enough to restrict my breathing, locking my head into position. To the camera she held aloft in her other hand, it looked like a sisterly embrace. To me, it felt like a capture. "Closer," she whispered, the phone hovering in her left hand, the screen glowing with our reflected faces. "Smile, Lexi, look happy." I forced the muscles of my face to obey. I bared my teeth. I looked at the lens. "Wio," Mallory counted. 2. I braced myself for the flash. There was no flash. Instead, the arm around my neck vanished, and 2 hands slammed onto the back of my head. It was not a playful shove. It was a calculated, violent drive of kinetic energy. My face did not just meet the frosting. It collided with the structural integrity hidden beneath the sugar. The world went white, then red. I felt the soft yield of the buttercream for a fraction of a second, and then my nose and forehead struck something unforgiving. It was the central wooden dowel, the rod used to keep 3 tiers of heavy cake from collapsing. The sound was not a squelch. It was a sickening crunch, wet and hard, vibrating through my skull and down into my jaw. My head snapped back from the impact, the force of the blow throwing my equilibrium into chaos. My chair, slick on the polished restaurant floor, lost its grip. I tipped backward. My arms flailed, grabbing at empty air, and then I hit the ground. The back of my head struck the hardwood floor with a hollow thud that seemed to echo inside my brain long after the sound had stopped. For 1 second, there was absolute silence. I lay on my back, staring up at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling. They were spinning, not gently, but violently, like a carousel unhinged from its gears. A chandelier above me smeared into a streak of crystal light. Then, the laughter started. It began as a nervous titter from a table nearby, the human reflex to diffuse tension. Then, seeing that my family was not rushing to my aid, others joined in. It became a wave of social noise, a cacophony of chuckles and guffaws. They thought it was a bit. They thought it was performance art. I tried to push myself up, but my elbows felt like they were made of water. I brought a hand to my face to wipe away the obstruction blinding my left eye. The substance on my fingers was thick and sticky. I rubbed it between my thumb and forefinger. It was warm. Chocolate frosting is usually room temperature or cool. This was hot. I blinked, trying to clear the fog. Through the smear of brown sugar, I saw a streak of bright crimson. Blood. It was dripping from my nose, mixing with the ganache, creating a grotesque slurry on my chin. "Oh my God!" Mallory's voice pierced through the ringing in my ears. She was standing over me, her hands clasped over her mouth, her eyes wide, but she was not looking at me. She was looking at the guests. "You are so dramatic. Alexis!" she shrieked, laughing breathlessly. "It is just a graduation tradition. Look at her, playing dead for effect." She grabbed a napkin from the table and tossed it down at me. It fluttered like a white flag of surrender and landed on my chest. "Get up, silly," she added, her voice dropping to a hiss that only I could hear as she bent down, pretending to help. "Stop making it weird. You are ruining the video." My mother appeared in my field of vision. She did not kneel. She did not check my pupils. She stood rigid, scanning the room to see who was watching. "Alexis, honestly," my mother whispered, her tone clipped and cold. "Do not make a scene. You are embarrassing your father. Wipe your face." "I think I am hurt," I stammered. My voice sounded distant, as if I were speaking from the bottom of a well. My tongue felt too large for my mouth. I tasted copper and sugar, a vile combination that made my stomach lurch. "You are fine," my father grumbled from somewhere above. I felt his hand grip my upper arm, his fingers digging into the tender flesh. He hauled me up with a strength that made my head loll on my neck. "Stand up," Everyone is looking at you. Laugh it off. I was vertical again, but the floor felt slanted. The restaurant swayed. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself, leaving a bloody handprint on the pristine white tablecloth. The waiter looked horrified, but he did not move. He was looking at my father, taking his cue from the man in the expensive blazer. "Look at that mess," Mallory giggled, pointing at my face. "You look like a horror movie. It is hilarious." "We should get a picture," a voice called out from a nearby booth. A man with a red face and a loosened tie raised his glass. "A memory of the night." "Yes," Mallory seized the control instantly. "Group photo. Come on. Mom, Dad, get in close. Alexis, stop slouching." They crowded around me. My mother draped her arm over my shoulder, her body tense, radiating disapproval. My father stood stiffly on the other side. Mallory took the front position, holding her phone high to get the angle. "Say concussion," Mallory joked. The flash went off. The light hit my retinas like a physical blow, a spike of agony that drove straight through my optic nerve and into the center of my brain. I flinched, a low moan escaping my throat. "Okay, that is enough," my father said abruptly, throwing a credit card onto the table. "Clean her up in the restroom. Lucinda, we are leaving. This has gone on long enough." The next hour was a fragmented nightmare. I remembered the rough texture of paper towels scraping against my skin as my mother scrubbed at my face in the bathroom, muttering about how difficult it would be to get chocolate out of my dress. I remembered the way the other women in the restroom averted their eyes, unwilling to witness the silent brutality of her ministrations. I did not drive. I could not. My father drove my car, while my mother followed in theirs. I sat in the passenger seat, my head resting against the cool glass of the window, watching the streetlights streak by like comets. Every bump in the road sent a fresh wave of nausea rolling through my gut. My phone buzzed in my lap. I lifted it with trembling hands. The screen brightness was set to low, but it still hurt to look at. A notification from social media popped up. "Mallory Ruiz tagged you in a video. Graduation prank gone wrong. Welcome to the real world. Sis." I tapped it. The video auto-played. There I was, smiling nervously. Then, the smash. The camera did not shake. Mallory had held it perfectly steady. The video captured the sickening sound of the impact, my body going limp, the fall. And then, it cut to a close-up of me on the floor, dazed and bloody, with a filter overlaid on the image. Cartoon stars circling my head. The comments were already rolling in. "Classic. She got wrecked. Is she okay?" That looked hard. Reply from Mallory. "She's fine. She's just a drama queen. We are laughing about it now." We were not laughing. When we arrived at my apartment, my parents walked me to the door but did not come inside. "Put some ice on it," my father said, handing me my keys. "And sleep it off. We will talk about the lake house paperwork tomorrow when you are thinking clearly." "Good night, Alexis," my mother added, patting my cheek, the uninjured one. "Try to be more careful next time." They left. I stumbled into my apartment, the silence greeting me like a heavy blanket. I dropped my keys. I did not pick them up. I walked straight to the bathroom, clutching the wall for support. I turned on the vanity light. The sudden brightness triggered a violent reaction. My stomach contracted, hard and fast. I barely made it to the sink before my body revolted. I retched, dry heaving over the porcelain, my knuckles white as I gripped the edges of the counter. There was nothing in my stomach but champagne and fear. I lifted my head and looked in the mirror. One side of my face was swelling rapidly, turning a deep, angry purple. My nose was swollen, but it was my eyes that terrified me. The pupils were different sizes. The left one was blown wide, a black pool swallowing the iris, while the right one was a pinprick. A sharp, stabbing pain erupted behind my left eye, rhythmic and intensifying with every beat of my heart. It felt as though someone was sliding a knife between the hemispheres of my brain. I sank to the tiled floor, the cold seeping into my legs. I closed my eyes, but the spinning did not stop. For the first time that night, The voice in my head, the one that always told me to apologize, to smooth things over, to be the good girl, was silent. In its place, a new primal instinct began to whisper, "Something is wrong. This is not just a bump. This is not a prank." And as the darkness at the edge of my vision began to creep inward, threatening to swallow me whole, I realized that my sister had not just smashed a cake into my face. She had tried to break me, and looking at the stranger in the mirror with the mismatched eyes, I was terrified that she might have finally succeeded. The morning sun did not feel like a new beginning. It felt like an interrogation lamp pressed directly against my retinas. I woke up on the bathroom floor, the tile cold against my cheek, with a sensation that my head was no longer a singular, solid object. It felt fragmented, as if the plates of my skull had been unlatched and were sliding precariously against one another. Every time I moved my eyes, a wave of nausea rolled through my stomach, violent and immediate. I knew I could not go back to sleep. I also knew, with a terrifying clarity, that I could not call my parents. If I called them, they would tell me to take an aspirin. They would tell me to stop being dramatic. They would tell me that going to the hospital would just create a bill and a story that the neighbors might hear. So, I drove myself. The drive to Ashford Harbor Medical Center was a blur of terrifying intervals. I kept the sunglasses on, but the light pierced through the sides, stabbing into the nerve clusters behind my left eye. I drove 10 miles per hour under the speed limit, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned the color of parchment. My brain felt too large for its casing, a sensation of pressure that made my teeth ache. When I stumbled into the emergency room, I tried to compose myself. I smoothed my rumpled shirt. I wiped the smudged remains of mascara from under my eyes. Even here, amidst the antiseptic smell and the beeping monitors, the training held. "Look presentable. Do not be a problem." "Name?" the receptionist asked, not looking up. "Alexis Ruiz," I whispered. My own voice sounded like it was coming from a radio in another room. "I think I have a concussion." They triaged me quickly. Perhaps it was the pallor of my skin or the way I was listing to the left, unable to walk in a straight line. They put me in a curtained bay, and the noise of the hospital, the rolling carts, the intercom pages, the crying child in the next room, felt like physical blows. The curtain swept back, and Dr. Owen Hart stepped in. He was young, perhaps in his late 30s, with a stillness about him that felt out of place in the chaos of the ER. He did not rush. He did not look at the clipboard immediately. He looked at me. "Good morning, Alexis," he said softly. "I am Dr. Hart. Tell me what is happening." "I fell," I said. The lie came out automatically, a pre-recorded track my mother had installed in my throat years ago. "I was at a dinner last night. I slipped. I hit my head." "Doctor." Hart paused. He looked at the bruising that had bloomed across my forehead and the bridge of my nose. It was a dark, violent purple, spreading like ink in water. "You fell forward?" he asked, his voice neutral. "Yes. No. I fell backward, but I hit my face on a table first." I stammered. The physics of my lie were falling apart, but I could not bring myself to say. My sister smashed my face into a cake because she wanted a viral video. It sounded too absurd. It sounded like something that happened to other families, the kind you read about in tabloids, not ours. "Okay," he said. He did not challenge me. Not yet. "Let us take a look." He began the neurological exam. He asked me to follow his finger with my eyes without moving my head. It should have been simple. It was impossible. My eyes stuttered, unable to track the smooth motion. When I tried to look to the far left, the room spun so violently I had to grab the rails of the bed to keep from falling off. "I am going to check your ears," he said. He shone a light into my ear canal. I flinched, a sharp hiss of pain escaping my teeth. "Sensitive to sound?" he asked. "Yes, and light, and everything," I admitted. "It feels like my skull does not fit anymore." He stopped. He lowered the otoscope and looked at me. really looked at me, with a focus that made me want to shrink under the sheets. "Alexis," he said, and the drop in his volume made the air in the cubicle go still. "Did someone hurt you?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "No," I said, too quickly. "I told you. I fell. I am just clumsy. I have always been clumsy." He held my gaze for 3 seconds, which is a very long time when you are lying. Then he nodded. "Once. I am ordering a CT scan of your head and cervical spine, and I want some X-rays. We need to see what is going on inside." The scan was a nightmare of claustrophobia and noise. The machine whirred and clicked, sounds that felt like they were scraping against my exposed nerves. I lay there, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes, sliding into my ears, thinking about the video Mallory had posted. I wondered if she was awake. I wondered if she was checking the view count. When I was back in the room, the wait felt eternal. I stared at the pattern on the privacy curtain, trying to count the threads to keep from vomiting. Finally, "Doctor." Hart returned. He did not come alone. A nurse came with him, standing quietly by the door. The energy in the room had shifted. It was no longer the routine atmosphere of a busy morning. It was heavy, somber. "Doctor." Hart pulled a rolling stool over and sat down. Bringing himself to my eye level, he held a tablet in his hands. "Alexis, I need you to listen to me very carefully," he said. He turned the tablet so I could see the grayscale images of my skull. He pointed to a thin, jagged line at the base of my cranium. "This is a basilar skull fracture," he explained, his finger tracing the hairline crack. "It is not displaced, which is good, but it is serious. It explains the dizziness, the nausea, the sensitivity. You took a significant blow. A very specific, high-velocity blow." I nodded, feeling the bile rise in my throat. "Okay, so, rest in ice?" "That is the injury from last night," he continued. Ignoring my attempt to minimize it, he swiped the screen. "But that is not the only thing I see." He pointed to another area, higher up on the parietal bone, and another near the orbit of my eye. "Do you see these white patches? These calcifications?" he asked. I squinted. "Yes, these are healed fractures. Alexis." "Doctor," Hart said. "Old ones, based on the remodeling of the bone. I would guess one is from about 2 years ago, and the other might be 3 or 4 years old. Maybe older." I stared at the screen. I remembered the time I walked into a door the day before my sister's engagement party. I remembered the time I slipped in the shower right after I got a promotion that Mallory had been jealous of. "I told you," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I am clumsy, doctor." Hart set the tablet down. "People are clumsy. Alexis, they trip, they bruise their shins, they sprain their wrists. They do not repeatedly fracture their skulls in different locations over a period of years." He leaned forward. "But there is something else. We ran a standard blood panel to check for clotting factors, because your bruising is much more extensive than I would expect for this type of impact." He picked up a piece of paper from his pocket. "Are you taking any blood thinners, warfarin, heparin, anything over the counter?" "No," I said. "I take a multivitamin. That is it. Your INR levels are elevated," he said, using a term I did not understand. "Your blood is taking too long to clot. It is significantly thinner than it should be for a healthy 32-year-old woman. That is why you are bleeding into the soft tissue so badly. That is why you are so dizzy. Your blood pressure is struggling to stabilize." "I don't understand," I said. "Is it a disease?" "It could be, doctor," Hart said carefully. "Or it could be ingested." The silence that followed that sentence was deafening. Ingested. My mind flashed to the vitamin smoothies Mallory had started making for me a few months ago, saying I looked tired. She insisted I drink them. She watched me drink them. "Doctor?" Hart stood up. He placed the tablet on the counter. He looked at the nurse, then back at me. "I have to call 911, he said. Panic, cold and sharp. spiked in my chest. What? No, no, please. You cannot. I have a legal and ethical obligation, he said firmly, his voice overriding my protest. This is not just a fall. Alexis, you have a skull fracture, evidence of repeated past head trauma, an unexplained coagulopathy that suggests you are being dosed with something. This fits the clinical criteria for non-accidental injury. It fits the criteria for domestic abuse or assault. My father will be furious, I blurted out. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. It was the truth of my life. Not I am scared, not I am hurt, but Dad will be mad. Doctor. Hart's expression softened, but his resolve did not break. I am not calling them because I think you are weak. Alexis, I am calling them because the medical evidence tells me you are not safe. He reached for the wall phone. I wanted to jump off the bed. I wanted to grab his arm. I wanted to beg him to let me go home so I could ice my face and apologize to my sister for ruining her video. The script was screaming in my head. Stop him. Fix it. Smooth it over. But my legs would not move, because beneath the panic, beneath the terror of my family's wrath, there was a tiny, fragile sensation blooming in my chest. It was unfamiliar. It was warm. It was the feeling of being believed. For 32 years. When I said it hurts, I was told you are fine. When I said stop, I was told you are overreacting. Now, a stranger with a medical degree and a grim face was looking at my bones and saying, I see it. It is real, and it is wrong. Doctor. Hart lifted the receiver. He dialed 3 numbers. Dispatch? This is Doctor. Hart at Ashford Harbor ER. I have a suspected assault case. Yes. I need an officer here immediately. I turned my head away from him. I looked up at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling, counting the little black dots. 1, 2, 3. I realized then that I had spent my entire life trying to be invisible, trying to be the glue that held a broken picture together. And now, the picture was burning, and the fire department was on the way. Make it stop, I whispered to the ceiling. But I did not know if I was talking about the pain, or the silence that had covered up the truth for so long. The doctor was still talking, his voice low and urgent, and for the first time, I let someone else speak for me. Detective Maris Klein did not look like the police officers I had seen on television. She did not storm into the room with a badge raised high, nor did she bark orders at the nurses. She entered my cubicle with the quiet, deliberate grace of someone who understood that loud noises could shatter fragile things. She was wearing a gray blazer, not a uniform, and her eyes were the color of slate, calm and unreadable. Ms. Ruiz? She asked, stopping at the foot of my bed. I am Detective Klein. Is it all right if I come in? I nodded, clutching the thin hospital blanket to my chest. The movement sent a fresh throb of pain through my temples. But the medication Dr. Hart had given me was starting to dull the sharpest edges. Is it okay if I sit here? She asked, gesturing to the chair Dr. Hart had vacated. She waited for my nod before sitting. She positioned herself so that her eyes were level with mine, not looking down, not towering over me. Doctor, Hart tells me you have had a rough night, she said softly. I would like to hear about it in your own words. Take your time. I took a breath that shuddered in my lungs. The script was there, ready to be read. It was a joke. It was an accident. We were just having fun. It was my graduation dinner, I began, my voice raspy. My sister, Mallory, wanted to do a prank, a cake smash. It is a thing people do on the internet. I see, Klein said. She did not take notes. She just watched me. And what happened next? She pushed my face into the cake, I said, focusing on a loose thread on the blanket. But I think she misjudged the distance, or the force. There was a dowel inside, a wooden rod. I hit it. She misjudged it, Klein repeated, her tone neutral. Did she apologize immediately? I paused, the memory of Mallory's laughter, the way she had shouted about me being dramatic. played in my mind. She was surprised. She thought I was acting. Acting, Klein said, testing the word. You were bleeding from the face, and she thought you were acting. She didn't know, I defended automatically. Mallory can be intense, but she didn't mean to hurt me like this. It's just how our family is. Loud. Klein shifted slightly. Alexis, I want to ask you something, and I need you to think before you answer. Is this the first time you have been injured when your sister was present? I don't understand, I said. Doctor, Hart mentioned you have a history of clumsiness, she said. Falls, bumps. Do you remember any specific incidents in the last few years? I am clumsy, I insisted. 2 years ago, I slipped down the stairs at my parents' house. I was wearing socks. It was slippery. Who was home? Klein asked. My parents were out, I recalled. Mallory was there. She was waiting for me at the bottom to show me a dress. And the time you got your hand slammed in the car door? Klein asked. I saw that in your medical file from an urgent care visit last year. The wind caught it, I said. Was anyone with you? Mallory. We were going to lunch. And the fall in the garage? Mallory was helping me move boxes. The silence that followed was heavy. I looked at Detective Klein, waiting for her to agree that it was all a coincidence. Instead, she reached into a folder she had brought with her. Doctor, Hart showed me your CT scan, she said. I want you to see it. She held up a printed image. It was a high-contrast picture of my skull. She pointed to a faint, white ridge on the bone, distinct from the dark crack at the base of my skull from last night. Do you see this? She asked. This is a healed fracture, based on the calcification. The radiologist estimates this happened between 1 and 3 years ago. Does that timeline sound familiar? I stared at the image. 1 to 3 years ago, I remembered a summer afternoon. I had told Mallory I was thinking about applying for a job in London, a job that would take me away from her and the family. We had been in the garage. She had tossed a heavy box to me, shouting, "Catch!" Before I was ready, I had stumbled back, tripped over a hose, and hit my head on the concrete floor. I had blacked out for a few seconds. When I woke up, Mallory was standing over me, saying, God, you are so useless. Alexis, don't tell Mom. She will freak out. I had spent the next month with debilitating headaches. I had told myself it was stress. I had told myself it was dehydration. I had migraines, I whispered. For months. That was not a migraine. Alexis, Klein said gently, that was a skull fracture, and you didn't get medical help because someone told you not to, didn't they? I felt tears hot and stinging in my eyes. She said I was fine. She brought me ice. Doctor. Hart stepped back into the room then, holding a clipboard. He looked grave. Detective, he said. The lab confirmed the blood work. Her INR is 3.5. Normal is around 1. Klein looked at me. Alexis, your blood is not clotting properly. That is why the bruising from the cake incident is so severe. If you had hit that dowel a fraction of an inch differently, with your blood this thin, you could have had a brain bleed. You could have died. I don't take blood thinners, I said, my voice rising in panic. I told you. We know you don't take them knowingly. Doctor, Hart said, but someone is giving them to you, or something that mimics them. Have you been eating or drinking anything prepared by someone else recently? The smoothies. The vitamin blends Mallory brought over every morning before work, because she was worried about my health. Oh my God, I breathed. The room seemed to tilt. Mallory, she makes me drinks. My phone, sitting on the bedside table, began to buzz violently. It danced across the plastic surface, a frantic, angry sound. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I looked at the screen. Mom, where are you? Why isn't your car at the apartment? Pick up. Dad. Stop playing games. Alexis, you are making your mother cry. Mallory, you are seriously overreacting. Delete the post immediately. People are asking questions. Do not ruin this for me. They are texting me, I said, reaching for the phone out of habit. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I have to tell them I'm okay. I have to tell them not to worry. Detective Klein reached out and gently placed her hand over mine. She did not take the phone away, but she stopped my movement. "Alexis," she said, and her voice was like a stone wall, solid, immovable, protective. "You do not have to answer that phone." I looked at her. "But they are my parents." "You are an adult," Klein said. "You are the victim of a crime. You do not have the obligation to report to the people who are protecting the person who hurt you. You do not have to tell them where you are. You do not have to explain yourself." "I don't?" I asked. The concept was so foreign it felt like she was speaking a different language. "No," she said. "In fact, I am advising you not to. Not until we have secured your safety." She stood up. The gentle demeanor hardened into professional resolve. "Based on the medical evidence, the history of injuries, and the witness statements from the restaurant staff regarding the incident last night, I am opening an investigation into assault and battery," Klein stated formally. "And given the blood work, we are looking at potential poisoning or tampering. This is no longer a civil matter. Alexis, this is a criminal investigation." "Criminal," I echoed. "Mallory?" "Mallory," Klein confirmed. "We are going to keep you here for observation. Doctor, Hart wants to monitor your clotting levels and your head injury. I am going to place a restriction on your room. No visitors unless authorized by you. Is that understood?" I looked at the phone, which had finally stopped buzzing. I looked at the CT scan of my broken skull. I looked at the doctor who had called 911 because he cared more about my life than my father did. "Yes," I said. The word was small, but it was mine. "Keep them out," Klein nodded to Doctor. "Hart, I will file the paperwork. Rest. Alexis, we will handle the noise." She turned and walked out, taking the chaos of my life with her, leaving me in the silence of the hospital room. For the first time in 32 years, the silence wasn't lonely. It was safe. The silence of the hospital room was not empty. It was filled with the hum of the air conditioner, the rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor, and the terrifying sound of my own thoughts rearranging themselves. The pain medication had dulled the sharp, stabbing agony behind my eyes to a dull, throbbing pressure. But in doing so, it had cleared the fog. For the first time in years, my mind felt sharp. It was as if a layer of gauze had been peeled away from my memory. I lay still, staring at the ceiling tiles, and I began to build a map. It was not a map of geography, but a map of pain. I started placing pins on the timeline of my life, marking every moment I had been hurt, every moment I had felt this specific kind of confusion. The stairs, 2 years ago, the car door, 18 months ago, the accidental overdose of sleeping pills I thought I had taken by mistake. Last Christmas. I closed my eyes, and the common denominator floated to the surface of the darkness. It was not just that Mallory was present, it was that Mallory was the narrator, in every single memory. Before I could even cry out, before I could assess my own body, Mallory's voice was there. "Oh my God, Alexis, you slipped. I told you those socks were slippery. You walked right into it. Why don't you look where you're going?" "Shh, don't cry, you're fine. You're just tired." She was always the first to speak. She planted the story before the reality had time to settle. She defined the event. I was the clumsy one. I was the dramatic one. I was the one who needed saving. And she? She was the savior. I remembered the aftermath of the stair fall. I had been lying at the bottom, my ankle throbbing, my head spinning. Mallory had been there instantly with a bag of frozen peas. She had stroked my hair. She had brought me a glass of water with a straw. "Don't tell Mom," she had whispered, her voice thick with conspiratorial affection. "She will just yell at you for being careless. We can handle this. I will take care of you." It was a ritual. The injury, then the care, the pain, then the pampering. It was a cycle of abuse disguised as sisterhood, and I had been so desperate for her approval that I had thanked her for the ice pack she applied to the bruise she had caused. But there was another layer to the map, a layer that had nothing to do with physical pain and everything to do with timing. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. My hand was steady now, fueled by a cold, burning adrenaline. I did not open my text to reply to my parents. I opened the search bar in my message history with Mallory. I typed in the word sensitive. The results scrolled down the screen. Dozens of them. July 12th. You are being too sensitive. Lexi, I didn't mean it like that. October 4th. God, why are you so sensitive? It was a joke. January 9th. You are imagining things again. You know how sensitive you get when you are stressed. I typed in crazy. Stop acting crazy. Don't be crazy. Nobody hates you. You sound crazy right now. It was a systematic dismantling of my perception. She had spent years telling me I could not trust my own brain, so that when she finally decided to break my skull, I would believe it was my own fault. Then, a new thought struck me. It was about the timing of the accidents. The stair fall happened 2 days before I was supposed to interview for a job in Chicago. I never made the interview because I was too dizzy to drive. The car door incident happened the week I started dating a man she didn't like. I had to cancel our third date because my hand was in a splint, and he ghosted me. And now, the graduation, the lake house. Grandma left the lake lot to the family, but she made me the executor of that specific asset. I remembered the day the will was read. Mallory had been vibrating with energy. She had been sparkly, laughing too loud, hugging everyone. It was a manic, predatory happiness. Just give me the folder, Lexi, she had said later that night. I used to work in real estate. Remember? I can organize it for you. You are so busy with your thesis. When I refused, she hadn't screamed. She had gone quiet, a cold, dead silence. And then, 10 minutes later, she was bringing me tea, smiling as if nothing had happened. At least drink this, she had said. You look exhausted. I sat up in the hospital bed, the movement making the room sway. I ignored it. I opened my email app. I needed to check something. 2 years ago, after the stair fall, the headaches hadn't stopped. I remembered making an appointment with a neurologist at a clinic in Providence. I remembered writing it in my planner, but I never went. Why? I searched my inbox for appointment. Nothing. I searched for cancellation. Nothing. I frowned. I knew I had made it. I scrolled back through the deleted folder. Then the archive. Still nothing. Then, I had an idea. I logged into the hospital portal for the regional health system. It took me 3 tries to remember my password. I went to the past appointments tab. There it was. Neurology consult. August 15th, 2024. Status, canceled by patient. I clicked on the details. The cancellation reason was listed as feeling better, no longer necessary, but it was the contact information that made my blood run cold. The confirmation email for the cancellation had not been sent to alexis.ruizmail.com. It had been sent to alexis.ruiz.health@gmail.com. I had never created that email address. I stared at the screen. My breath catching in my throat. Mallory, she had created a shadow account. She had impersonated me. She had canceled my doctor's appointment to keep me from finding out that my concussion was actually a fracture. She had needed me to stay injured, ignorant, and under her control, and the blood thinners. The doctor said my blood was thin, too thin. I thought back to the night before the graduation dinner. Mallory had come over to my apartment. She was hyper, excited about the surprise she had planned. She had brought a green juice from that expensive organic place downtown. Drink it, she had insisted, watching me from the kitchen island. It has a double shot of wheatgrass and ginger. You need to look glowing for the photos tomorrow. I had drunk it. It tasted bitter, metallic under the sweetness of the apple. I had finished it because I wanted her to leave. She had watched me swallow every drop. I realized then that the violence at the restaurant wasn't a prank gone wrong. It was an execution. She had prepped my body to bleed. She had weakened my defenses. She had set the stage, brought the weapon, the cake with the hidden dowel, and then she had struck. If I had died, it would have been a tragic accident. Poor clumsy Alexis. She slipped. She hit her head. It was just a freak tragedy. Mallory would have cried at my funeral. She would have worn black and looked beautiful. And then, she would have inherited the control of the lake house. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my head injury. It was the sickness of realization. I wasn't scared of Mallory anymore. I was terrified of the truth that my parents had enabled this. They knew she was intense. They knew she was difficult, but they had sacrificed my safety on the altar of their reputation. They let her rewrite my history because it was easier than reading the real one. The door to my room opened. It was Detective Klein. She had a folder in her hand, her expression unreadable. "Alexis?" she said softly. "How are you holding up?" I looked at her. I looked at the woman who was a stranger, yet who was the only person in the world who had asked me the right questions. I put my phone down on the sheet. I did not want to protect them anymore. I did not want to be the glue. "Detective," I said, and my voice was steady, hard as the bone they had broken. "I need to tell you something. I found something." She stepped closer, opening her notebook. "What is it?" "I didn't just fall," I said. "And she didn't just push me." I looked her in the eye. "She has been poisoning me," I said. "And I can prove that she canceled the doctor who would have found out about it 2 years ago. This didn't start with the cake. Detective, she has been trying to kill me by inches for years." Detective Klein returned to my room 3 hours later, and the atmosphere around her had shifted from sympathetic to predatory. She was no longer just listening. She was hunting. She carried a laptop under her arm and a clear plastic evidence bag in her gloved hand. Inside the bag was a jagged, frosting-smeared piece of wood. "We need to watch something. Alexis," she said, setting the laptop on the rolling table and angling it toward me. "And I need you to be prepared. It is not easy to see yourself like this." "Did you get the camera footage?" I asked, my voice tight. "It took some persuasion," Klein admitted. "Logging into the system. The owner of Cedar and Salt was worried about his reputation. He kept saying your father was a good customer and that the family wanted to handle this privately. But once I showed him the warrant based on the assault report from the hospital, he stopped protecting your parents." She pressed play. The video was grainy, a high-angle shot from a security camera mounted in the corner of the dining room. I saw my family's table. I saw the back of my own head. I looked small, hunched over, trying to shrink away from the attention. Then, Mallory entered the frame. I watched my sister walk toward the table, on the screen. Her movements were not the clumsy, joyful strides of a girl excited to surprise her sibling. They were precise. She paused briefly at the edge of the frame, shifting her weight. "Watch her feet," Klein instructed. I looked. Mallory planted her feet wide, bracing herself. She was not positioning herself to present a cake. She was bracing for impact. She shifted the heavy platter to her left hand for a split second, adjusting her grip, then brought it back to center. "Now watch her hands," Klein said. Slowing the playback speed, on the screen, Mallory placed the cake in front of me. She leaned in. I saw her left hand snake around my neck. In real life, it had felt like a hug. On the video, it looked like a chokehold. She anchored me to the chair. Then came the smash. It was not a playful smear. It was a piston-like motion. Her right hand went to the back of my head, and she drove my face down with terrifying velocity. At the same time, her left hand, the one around my neck, held my shoulder rigid, preventing me from recoiling. She had pinned me. "That is not a prank," Klein said, her voice devoid of emotion. "That is a calculated strike. She immobilized your cervical spine to maximize the impact of the faceplant. If you had flinched backward, you would have just gotten frosting on your nose. She made sure you hit the core." I felt sick. "The core?" Klein reached for the evidence bag. She held up the piece of wood. It was thick, about the diameter of a broom handle, and sharpened at one end. "We recovered this from the restaurant's dumpster," she said. It's a hardwood central support dowel. Overkill for a cake that size. She opened a file on her computer. It was a transcript of text messages. We got a subpoena for your sister's phone records an hour ago, Klein explained. This is a conversation with the bakery. Sweetest Thing Creations. From 3 days ago, she read the text aloud. Mallory, make sure the center is solid. I am transporting it in a convertible, and I do not want it to wobble. Put a thick rod in the middle, something that won't snap. Bakery. We usually use plastic for a 10-inch cake. It is safer. Mallory. No, use wood. I am paying for stability. I want it solid. I want it hard, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She engineered the weapon, Klein said. She knew exactly where that rod was, and she drove your forehead directly onto it. The detective clicked to another window. We also spoke to the server who brought the card out. He said Mallory intercepted him in the hallway near the kitchen. She gave him a $50 tip. That sounds like her, I murmured. She always tips for favors. She told him, and I quote, I want to surprise my sister, so don't tell her I switched the cake stand. She was establishing control over the physical evidence before the event even happened. Klein sat back, studying me. But that is not the only pattern we found. Once we suspected that she manages the narrative, we pulled the emergency response logs for your address and your parents' address for the last 5 years. She turned the screen back to me. It was a list of calls. 3 years ago, May 12th, 2:14 in the afternoon. Klein read, a call to 911 from your parents' landline. Caller reported a fall down the basement stairs. Female victim, conscious but disoriented. I remember that, I said, rubbing my temple. I didn't go to the hospital. Mallory said I was just shaken up. Look at the disposition of the call, Klein pointed out. Caller canceled request for ambulance. Stated victim refused transport. Caller ID, Mallory Ruiz. You didn't refuse transport, did you? Alexis? No, I whispered. I remember lying at the bottom of the stairs. I couldn't move my leg. I heard her on the phone. She told me the paramedics were going to take hours to get there, and that it would be faster if she just drove me. But she never drove me. She put me on the couch and gave me painkillers. She called 911 to create a record that an accident happened, Klein theorized. Just in case you died or had permanent damage, she could say she tried to get help, but then she canceled it to prevent a medical professional from seeing the injury up close. She wanted the documentation of the accident, not the scrutiny of the solution. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. Mallory had been curating a file on me for years, a file labeled Alexis the Clumsy Sister, Alexis the Liability. Every fall, every bruise, every canceled doctor's appointment was a brushstroke in a painting she was creating for an audience I didn't even know existed. She manages the aftermath, I said, the realization settling into my bones deeper than the fracture. She hurts me, and then she becomes the only person allowed to fix me. That is why she was so mad when I came here alone. She lost control of the scene. Exactly, Klein said, which brings us to the most important question. Why? Violence like this usually escalates for a reason. Domestic abusers escalate when they feel they are losing control, or when there is a specific trigger. Why now? Why a public execution at a graduation dinner? Why risk exposure? I looked at the jagged piece of wood in the evidence bag. I thought about the text messages. I thought about the blood thinners in my smoothies. Mallory didn't just want to hurt me. She wanted to incapacitate me. She wanted me confused, dizzy, and medically incompetent. The paperwork, I said aloud. What paperwork? Klein asked, her pen hovering over her notebook. My grandmother died 6 months ago, I explained, my voice gaining strength. She left a significant estate. Most of it was divided evenly. But there was one asset she kept separate, a lakefront property in Vermont. It is worth over $2 million. Klein's eyes narrowed. Who gets the property? The trust owns it, I said. But my grandmother appointed a single executor to manage that specific trust. She didn't trust my father with it because he has a gambling problem, and she didn't trust Mallory because, Well, she just didn't. She trusted you, Klein surmised. I am the sole signatory, I said. I have the power to sell it, keep it, or develop it. Mallory has been pressuring me to sell to a developer friend of hers for months. A quick cash infusion. She has debts I don't know about. Or maybe she just wants the money. But I told her I wanted to wait. I told her I was going to hire my own lawyer to review the trust documents. I looked at Klein. The will was officially probated and unsealed 5 days ago. That was when I officially got the power of attorney over the land. That was when I became the obstacle. 5 days ago, Klein noted. And 3 days ago, she ordered a cake with a hidden weapon. If I am incapacitated, I continued, following the logic to its terrifying conclusion. If I am declared mentally incompetent due to a traumatic brain injury or a history of unstable behavior, the executorship reverts to the next of kin. Which would be your parents, Klein said. And my parents do whatever Mallory tells them to do. I finished. The room went silent. The pieces of the puzzle snapped together with a deafening finality. The dowel in the cake wasn't just a piece of wood, it was a gavel. Mallory had tried to sentence me to a life of incompetence so she could cash a check. Okay, Klein said, closing the laptop with a sharp snap. That is motive. That is means. And we have the opportunity on tape. We are done treating this as a family dispute. She stood up and walked to the door, opening it to signal the uniformed officer standing guard outside. Officer, she said, her voice crisp and authoritative. Get a unit to the Ruiz residence. We are bringing her in. I watched them, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs that felt like a war drum. For the first time, I wasn't just the victim in the video. I was the witness who was about to burn the whole script down. The motive, it turned out, was not hate. It was not jealousy. It was simple. Cold-blooded arithmetic. Detective Klein returned to my room an hour later, but she was not alone. She was accompanied by a man in a sharp gray suit who introduced himself as Mr. Sterling, a forensic accountant working with the district attorney's office. They did not bring warmth. They brought a timeline that chilled me faster than any ice pack Mallory had ever pressed to my skin. We spoke to your family's estate attorney, Mr. Thorne, Klein said, taking her usual seat. He was reluctant to violate attorney-client privilege, but given the active criminal investigation and the evidence of poisoning, he was compelled to cooperate. The lake house, I said, the realization sitting heavy in my gut. It is about the lake house. It is about the liquidity of the lake house. Mr. Sterling corrected, opening a thick file. Your grandmother's trust is structured very specifically. The property, valued at roughly $2.5 million, is locked in a conservation easement. However, there is a singular exit clause. The designated trustee, you, can authorize a sale if, and only if, the funds are immediately reinvested into a specific charitable foundation she set up. I knew that, I said. That is why I wouldn't sign the papers Mallory brought me. She wanted to sell to a developer who plans to build condos. That violates the easement. I told her I couldn't do it. Exactly, Sterling said. But there is a secondary clause, Section 4, Paragraph B. If the primary trustee is deemed medically or mentally incapacitated for a period of more than 90 days, the power of attorney transfers to the secondary trustee. I looked at him, though I already knew the answer. Who is the secondary trustee? Mallory Ruiz, Sterling said. The silence in the room was thick. I felt a cold sweat prickle along my hairline. If I am incapacitated, I whispered. If I have a traumatic brain injury. If I am dizzy, confused, unable to track a conversation. If you are the girl who keeps falling down, Klein interjected, her voice sharp. The girl who needs her big sister to manage her appointments, her diet, and her decisions. She reached into her folder and pulled out a document that made my breath hitch. It was not a medical scan. It was a legal draft. We found this on your sister's cloud drive, Klein said. She created it 3 weeks ago. It is a petition for temporary guardianship of an adult. I stared at the paper. In the matter of the guardianship of Alexis Ruiz, the fields were partially filled out: my name, my address, and under the section for reason for guardianship, she had typed, "Severe cognitive decline due to repeated traumatic brain injury and neurological instability." She was not just hurting you. Alexis, Klein said, her eyes locked on mine. She was building a medical dossier. Every time she pushed you, every time she poisoned you to make you dizzy, she was manufacturing the evidence she needed to take away your autonomy. She was going to walk into a courtroom, show them the history of falls, show them the confusion caused by the drugs she was slipping you, and a judge would have handed her the pen. And once she had the pen, Sterling added, she could sign the sale documents for the land. We found correspondence between her and the developer. She has promised him the title by the end of the month. In exchange, she gets a consulting fee of $400,000 off the books. I felt the room spinning again. But this time it was not the concussion. It was the sheer, terrifying scope of the betrayal. I thought about the last few months. I thought about how often Mallory had looked at me with that pitying expression, the one that made me feel small. "You look so tired. Lexi, your eyes are unfocused. Maybe you should take a sabbatical. I can handle the bills. You are forgetting things again, remember? You promised me you would do that. God, your memory is getting scary." She hadn't just been gaslighting me for sport. She was paving the road to my legal erasure. She wanted to declare me incompetent, I said, the words tasting like copper. She was going to lock me away in my own mind so she could cash a check. And she was running out of time, Klein noted. You mentioned you just finished your master's degree. You are about to start a new phase of your career. You are becoming more independent, not less. She needed a catastrophic event, something public, something undeniable. The graduation dinner, I said. If I had collapsed there if the ambulance had come and I was speaking nonsense because of the concussion, it would have been the final nail, Klein agreed. Witnesses would have seen you unstable and clumsy. The medical report would show severe trauma. She would have filed that guardianship paperwork the next morning. Klein leaned forward. Alexis, I need you to think. We know about the smoothies, but you mentioned you go to your parents' house every Sunday for dinner. Is Mallory always there? Always, I said. She insists on cooking. She makes the cocktails. She serves the plates. I squeezed my eyes shut, a memory surfacing. Last Sunday, I had arrived early. I had walked into the kitchen and seen Mallory standing over the stove, stirring a pot of sauce. When I entered, she had jumped, slamming the lid down. Don't peek, she had scolded, her smile too wide, too brittle. It is a secret recipe. I had eaten that sauce, and 2 hours later, I had felt so heavy, so sluggish, that I had to sleep in the guest room instead of driving home. She has access, I said, opening my eyes. She has always had access. She is the golden child. No one watches her. Why now? Sterling asked again. Why the urgency? $400,000 is a lot of money, but is it enough to kill your sister for? It is not just the money, I said, a new connection firing in my brain. It is my job. Klein raised an eyebrow. Your job? I work for Briarpoint Risk and Compliance, I stated. I am a supply chain auditor. My entire career is built on finding discrepancies in ledgers, finding fraud. I looked at the detective. 2 months ago, my father complained about his retirement accounts looking light. He thought it was just the market. I told him I would take a look. I told Mallory I was going to do a full audit of the family finances once I graduated. The realization hit me so hard I actually gasped. Mallory handles Dad's accounts, I said. She has been helping him for years. Klein's face hardened. If you audited those books, I would find it, I said. I would find whatever she has been stealing. If she has debts, if she has been siphoning money, I am the one person in the family who knows how to track it. So she had to stop you, Klein said. She couldn't just distract you. She needed to discredit you. If you're legally incompetent, your audit means nothing. You are just the crazy sister making up stories. She was protecting herself, I said. The land deal was just a way to fill the hole she dug before I found it. The cruelty of it was absolute. She wasn't just going to break my skull. She was going to dismantle my credibility, my career, and my freedom, all to cover her own crimes. Detective Klein closed the folder. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. "We have enough for an arrest," Klein said. "We have the weapon, the medical evidence, the motive, and the fraudulent documents. But if we arrest her now, she will lawyer up. She will claim the guardianship papers were just a draft because she was worried about you. She will claim the dowel was the bakery's mistake. She will claim the poisoning is environmental." "She is good at lying," I said. "She is the best I have ever seen." "We need her to say it," Klein said. "We need her to admit that she knows exactly what happened to you." Klein leaned in close. "I have a plan, Alexis, but it requires you to do something incredibly difficult. It requires you to walk back into that family dynamic one last time." "What do I have to do?" I asked. "We are going to set a trap," Klein explained. "We are going to have your lawyer call her. He is going to tell her that you are awake, but that your memory is fragmented, that you are confused, and that you are ready to sign the power of attorney because you are scared of your own mind." "She will come running," I said bitterly. "She will," Klein agreed. "She will bring the papers. She will try to close the deal. And when she does, we will be listening. But you have to be the one to face her. You have to look her in the eye and let her believe she's won, just long enough for her to tighten her own trap." I stared at the window. The sun was going down, dragging long, bruised shadows across the floor. I thought about my parents, probably at home right now, rehearsing concern while worrying about their reputation. I thought about Mallory, refreshing her socials, counting her likes, waiting for me to disappear quietly. I could refuse. I could let the police work with what they already had. Maybe it would be enough, but then I remembered the taste of blood and frosting. I remembered the sickening jolt in my head, the way the world seemed to split for a second. I remembered how she smiled when she said, "Smile for the story." I didn't just want justice. I wanted the truth to be so loud that even my parents couldn't pretend they didn't hear it. "Do it," I told Detective Klein. "Set it up. I want to see her face when the script flips." The door to my hospital room didn't open. It flew wide, sudden and uninvited. I had been expecting the silence to last a little longer, but the peace Detective Klein had promised was shattered by the clicking of heels on linoleum. My mother, Lucinda, swept into the room, bringing with her a cloud of nervous energy and the smell of expensive hairspray. My father, Graham, followed close behind, his face set in a grim line that I usually associated with a dip in the stock market or a scratch on his sedan. They did not look at the monitors. They did not look at the IV drip in my arm. They did not look at the dark, swollen bruising that mapped the violence across my face. "Alexis," my mother said, her voice pitched high and tight, "do you have any idea what is going on outside? There is a police car parked in the loading zone. A police car." "Hello, Mom," I said. My voice was raspy, but for the first time in my life, I did not apologize for existing. "We have been trying to call you for hours," my father grunted, standing at the foot of the bed like a sentinel guarding a breached fortress. "Mallory is a wreck. She is hysterical. She says the police are asking questions about assault. Assault. Alexis, for a cake." "It wasn't just a cake, Dad," I said, feeling the weight of the detective standing quietly in the corner of the room. My parents had barely registered her presence, treating her like a piece of furniture. "She broke my skull." "Oh, stop it," my mother snapped, waving her hand dismissively. "You always make everything so heavy. You are tired. You have been studying too hard for that degree, and your body is run down. Mallory was just playing. She didn't know you were so brittle." "Brittle," I repeated. It was a new word for the lexicon. Usually, it was sensitive, clumsy, or weak. "We need to fix this before it gets out of hand," my father said, pulling a chair over but not sitting in it. "The neighbors are already talking. I saw Mrs. Gable looking at our driveway this morning. We are not the kind of family that has police involvement. Alexis, we resolve things internally. Internally, I said. Like when I fell down the stairs? Like when I smashed my hand? Exactly, my mother said, missing the irony completely. We take care of each other. Now, tell this officer it was a misunderstanding. Tell her you were dizzy before the dinner. Tell her you slipped. It was a script. I had read it 1,000 times. Scene 1. Alexis gets hurt. Scene 2. The family convinces Alexis it is her fault. Scene 3. Silence. But before I could answer, the door swung open again. Mallory appeared. She was dressed in a soft, cream-colored sweater that made her look innocent. Almost angelic. She was holding a large bouquet of hydrangeas, my favorite flower, and her eyes were rimmed with red. It was a masterclass in performance. "Lexi!" she cried out, rushing toward the bed. "Oh my God, look at you. I am so sorry. I had no idea." She placed the flowers on the tray table and reached for my hand. Her skin was warm. Her grip was firm. "I didn't know you were so weak. Sis, I thought you could take a joke. I feel terrible." "Do you?" I asked, looking at her dry cheeks. "Of course I do." She turned to our parents, widening her eyes. "I told you she was fragile. Mom, I told you she's been acting weird lately, confused, dizzy. I think the stress of the master's program broke her a little." She leaned in close to me, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Can we talk alone for a second? Just sisters? I need to explain something to you without them." She jerked her head toward the detective. Detective Klein stepped forward from the shadows. "I am afraid that is not possible. Ms. Ruiz, your sister is under protective observation. All conversations happen in my presence." Mallory stiffened. She looked at Klein with a flash of pure venom, then masked it instantly with a hurt expression. "I am just trying to apologize to my sister," Mallory said, her voice wobbling. "Why are you treating me like a criminal? Alexis, tell her to leave. Tell her we are fine." I looked at Mallory. I looked at the way she stood, creating a physical barrier between me and the door. "No," I said. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "What?" Mallory asked, her smile faltering. "No," I said again, louder this time. "I want her here." Mallory took a step back, her eyes narrowing. She turned to our parents. "See? This is what I was talking about. She has always hated me. She is jealous because I'm happy, and she is well. She is Alexis. She is trying to punish me." "Alexis, please," my mother pleaded, wringing her hands. "Don't be vindictive. Your sister brought you flowers." "I have a solution," Mallory said quickly, cutting off my father's grumbling. She reached into her oversized designer bag. "I spoke to the family lawyer. He said this whole police thing is just a procedural error because the hospital overreacted. He drafted a simple statement, a waiver." She pulled out a crisp, folded document. "It just says that this was an accident and that you do not want to press charges," Mallory explained. Smoothing the paper out on the bedspread, she produced a pen from her pocket. "And there is a clause here that says you agree to let me handle the medical bills and the insurance paperwork while you recover. You know how you get with forms. Lexi, you get confused. I just want to help." I looked at the document. The header did not say waiver of liability. It read, "Power of attorney and temporary guardianship designation." It was the same document Detective Klein had shown me earlier, just reformatted. It gave Mallory full legal authority over my medical decisions, my finances, and my estate for a period of 6 months, citing temporary cognitive incapacity. If I signed this, I wasn't just dropping the charges, I was handing her the knife she used to stab me. "Just sign it, honey," my mother urged. "Let's put this ugly business behind us and go home. We can order takeout." "Yeah, sign it," my father said. "Stop being difficult." I looked at my father. "Did you read it, Dad?" "I don't need to read it," he snapped. "Mallory handles the paperwork. She knows what is best." "She handles your retirement accounts too, doesn't she?" I asked. My father blinked. What does that have to do with anything? Everything, I said. I picked up the paper. Mallory's eyes lit up. She thought she had won. She thought the old Alexis, the doormat, had returned. I looked her dead in the eye, and I ripped the paper in half. The sound of tearing paper was louder than a scream. I will not sign anything, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I had suppressed for 3 decades. I am not confused. I am not weak, and I am not brittle. I know exactly what you did. You ungrateful little, my mother started. Stepping forward, her face twisting into a scowl I knew well. Lucinda, Detective Klein's voice cut through the room, sharp and authoritative. Step back. Mallory stared at the torn pieces of paper on the bed. Her mask fell. The angelic sister vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating woman who had ordered a wooden dowel for a cake. You think you are smart? Mallory hissed, abandoning the sweet sister act entirely. You think because you got a degree you understand how the world works? You are nothing without us. You are a ghost. Alexis, we made you, and we can unmake you. Mallory, my father warned, but it was weak. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He wasn't afraid for me. He was afraid of me. He realized that the silence he had purchased with my pain was no longer for sale. Get out, I said. You can't talk to us like that, my mother cried. We are your family. Officer, I said, looking at Klein. Please remove them from my room. Klein stepped forward, hand resting near her belt. You heard her. Visiting hours are over. Leave now, or I will escort you out in handcuffs for witness intimidation. My mother gasped. My father turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. He grabbed my mother's arm and pulled her toward the door. Mallory lingered for 1 second longer. She leaned over the bed, close enough that I could smell the mint on her breath. You think you won? She whispered, her eyes dead and cold. You don't even know the game. I write the rules in this house. Alexis, watch your back. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking a rhythm of retreat. The door closed. The room was silent again. I looked at the torn paper on my lap. I looked at the hydrangeas, beautiful and toxic. She threatened you, Klein noted, pulling out her phone. That goes in the report. Let her threaten, I said, sweeping the flowers off the table and into the trash can. She thinks she writes the rules. She is about to find out that I am the one holding the pen. The wire taped to my chest felt like a second heartbeat, cold and hard against my skin. I adjusted the collar of my oversized sweater, checking in the rearview mirror to make sure the tiny microphone was invisible. My head was still throbbing, a dull, rhythmic reminder of the fracture at the base of my skull, but my mind was crystal clear. The fog of the concussion had lifted, replaced by a singular, icy focus. Remember, Detective Klein's voice came through the tiny earpiece I had hidden under my hair. Let her talk. She needs to feel like she is in control. Arrogance is where she slips. I know, I whispered to the empty car. I am ready. I stepped out into the driveway of my parents' house in suburban Ashford. It was a picture-perfect 2-story colonial, with manicured hedges and a fresh coat of slate-gray paint. Inside, I knew, was a minefield. My mother had insisted on a reconciliation dinner, which in the Ruiz family dictionary meant a public performance of forgiveness so the neighbors stop gossiping. When I walked through the front door, the smell of pot roast and anxiety hit me instantly. The living room was full. My mother had invited Aunt Sarah, Uncle Ben, and a few cousins, witnesses to ensure that everyone behaved. The air was thick with tension. People were speaking in hushed tones, sipping iced tea, and glancing at the door as if expecting a bomb to roll in. Alexis! My mother cried, rushing over. She looked exhausted, her makeup applied a little too heavily to cover the stress lines. Oh, thank goodness you came. You look rested. I didn't. I looked like I had gone 5 rounds with a heavyweight boxer. The bruising on my face had faded to a sickly yellow-green, and my left eye was still bloodshot. But I played the part. I am okay, Mom, I said softly, keeping my voice weak. I just want to get this over with. Of course, my father muttered. Emerging from the kitchen with a scotch in his hand, he wouldn't meet my eyes. Mallory is on her way. She just had to print some things out. We just want peace. Lexi, that is all we want. Peace, I repeated. Right. We waited for 20 minutes. Mallory was late. It was a power move she had perfected years ago. Keep them waiting, make them anxious, then arrive like the sun breaking through the clouds. When the door finally opened, she swept in. She looked immaculate in a tailored navy dress, her hair blown out to perfection, holding a leather portfolio. There was no trace of the crying, hysterical sister from the hospital. This was Mallory the manager, Mallory the fixer. Hi, everyone, she announced, flashing a bright, practiced smile at the relatives. Sorry I'm late. Traffic on the bridge was a nightmare. Oh, Alexis. She walked over to me, her face softening into a mask of pity. She reached out to hug me. I forced myself not to flinch. I let her wrap her arms around me, smelling the expensive perfume that masked the rot underneath. I am so glad you are being reasonable, she whispered in my ear. We are going to take such good care of you. She pulled back and clapped her hands. Okay, let's not make this a big, heavy thing. Dinner is almost ready. But Lexi and I just need 5 minutes in the study to sign some boring paperwork for Grandma's estate. Then we can eat. Go ahead, girls, my mother said, looking relieved. Don't take too long. We went into my father's study. Mallory closed the door and locked it. The click of the deadbolt echoed in the silence. She walked behind the heavy oak desk, my father's desk, and sat down. She gestured for me to sit in the guest chair. The dynamic was established instantly. She was the boss. I was the supplicant. Okay, look, Mallory said, opening the portfolio. She slid a stack of documents toward me. I know things got heated at the hospital. I forgive you for that. You were confused. The doctor said head injuries make people paranoid. I was confused, I said, repeating the line Klein had coached me on. I don't remember much of that night. It is all a blur. Mallory's eyes lit up. This was what she wanted to hear. Exactly. That is what I told Mom. You were just rambling, but we need to secure the assets. Lexi, the developer called again. If we don't move on the lake house by Friday, the deal is dead, and Grandma would want us to be smart. She pointed to the signature line. This gives me the authority to handle the closing for you. Since, you are not up to reading legal jargon right now. I looked at the paper. It was the same power of attorney form, just retitled. But Mallory, I said, making my voice tremble slightly. The easement, Grandma said we couldn't sell to a developer. It has to be preserved. Grandma is dead, Alexis, Mallory said, her voice dropping the sweetness. And honestly, she was senile when she wrote that will. $2.5 million. Do you have any idea what that can do for us? For me? For you? I asked. For the family, she corrected quickly. Dad's retirement accounts are a mess. He made some bad calls. If we don't infuse cash soon, they are going to lose the house. Do you want that on your conscience? I paused. Dad's accounts are light because he made bad calls? Or because someone has been helping him manage them? Mallory froze. Her hand hovered over the paper. What is that supposed to mean? I am just asking, I said, looking down at my hands. I feel like things don't add up. The stairs, the car door, the cake. It feels like bad luck follows me whenever money comes up. Mallory let out a short, sharp laugh. She leaned back, crossing her arms. She felt safe here. The door was locked. The parents were outside. I was the damaged little sister. You are so dramatic, she said, shaking her head. Look, accidents happen. You are clumsy. You always have been. Sometimes. She paused, a smirk playing on her lips. Sometimes an oops helps things fall into place. My heart hammered against the wire. What do you mean? What place? Mallory sighed. the arrogance finally spilling over. She picked up a pen and tapped it on the desk. The place where we don't lose everything because you want to hug trees. Alexis. God. You are so stubborn. Yes. Okay? I needed you to step aside. I needed you to be unavailable for a few months. The audit you wanted to do? The deep dive into the family books? You would have ruined everything. So you hurt me, I said. To stop the audit? I didn't want to hurt you badly, she said, waving her hand as if discussing a minor inconvenience. I just needed you foggy. The dizziness? That was just a little help to keep you in bed. But then you had to go and act all high and mighty at the dinner. I had to improvise. If you were incapacitated, I could sign the deal, fill the hole in Dad's account before he noticed the missing $300,000, and everyone wins. $300,000? I said. You stole $300,000 from Dad. I borrowed it, she snapped. And I'm putting it back with the developer's money. It is a bridge loan. Alexis, that is how business works. But you? You are just an obstacle. You have always been in the way, standing there with your little master's degree, judging me. Well, guess what? The smart one is the one who gets paid. She pushed the paper forward again. Sign it. Or I swear to God, the next accident won't be a cake. It will be the brakes on your car. Is that a threat? I asked. It is a promise. She smiled. Now be a good sister and... The door to the study did not just open. It was kicked in. The wood splintered with a deafening crack. Mallory screamed and jumped up. Knocking the chair over, Detective Klein stepped into the room, her weapon drawn but pointed low. Behind her were two uniformed officers from the Ashford Police Department. Mallory Ruiz, Klein shouted, her voice filling the small room. Step away from the desk. Put your hands where I can see them. What? Who? Mallory stammered, looking frantically from me to the police. What is going on? Mom! Dad! My parents rushed to the doorway, their faces pale masks of shock. My mother clutched her pearls. My father looked like he was having a stroke. We heard everything, Mallory, Klein said, moving in to cuff her. We have the recording, the theft, the poisoning, the admission of premeditated assault, and the threat against your sister's life. No! Mallory shrieked as the officer grabbed her wrist. She is lying. She is crazy. It is a prank. Tell them. Alexis? She looked at me, her eyes wide with desperation. Alexis, tell them we were just role-playing. Tell them. I stood up slowly. My head didn't hurt anymore. We weren't playing. Mallory, I said, my voice steady and cold. And I am not clumsy. Mallory's face crumpled. The confidence, the arrogance, the shiny veneer of the perfect daughter. It all dissolved in a single second. What was left was something ugly, small, and terrified. My mother stepped into the room, trembling. Mallory? What did you say? You took the money? Mallory looked at our mother, and for the first time, she didn't try to lie. She sneered. Oh, shut up, Mom, Mallory spat, the venom spraying out. You are useless. You let this happen. If you hadn't coddled her, I wouldn't have had to do this. The room went dead silent. My mother recoiled as if slapped. My father stood frozen, staring at the daughter he had protected, finally seeing the monster he had raised. Get her out of here, Klein ordered. As they dragged her past me, Mallory didn't struggle. She just stared at me with dead, shark-like eyes. You are nothing, she hissed. Maybe, I said, watching them haul her toward the front door where the flashing blue lights were waiting. But I am the one who is free. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. It was a sharp, metallic snap that severed the history of the Ruiz family into two distinct eras, the time before the truth and the time after. Detective Klein did not handle my sister with the gentleness my parents had always afforded her. She spun Mallory around, securing her wrists behind her back with professional efficiency. Mallory Ruiz, You are under arrest for aggravated assault, tampering with evidence, and attempted fraud, Klein recited, her voice flat and unyielding. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. Mallory did not remain silent. She began to laugh, a high, brittle sound that sounded like glass shattering in a garbage disposal. Then, just as quickly, the laughter dissolved into a sob. She twisted her body, trying to look at our parents, who were huddled together by the fireplace as if seeking warmth from a fire that had long gone out. "Do something!" Mallory screamed at them. "Dad, tell them. Tell them it is just a family dispute. You can't let them take me." My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the handcuffs. He looked at the daughter who had managed his accounts, the daughter who had been the golden standard of his life. He looked at me, standing by the desk with my swollen face and the wire taped to my chest. "Mallory," my father rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves. "Did you steal from me?" "I fixed things," Mallory shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of pure ugliness. "I always fix things. You are the one who messed up the accounts, old man. I was cleaning up your mess. I was saving this house." She lunged toward them, restrained only by the officer holding her arm. "And you," she spat at my mother. "This is your fault. You always chose her. You always coddled Alexis because she was the baby, because she was sweet. You made me do this. I had to be the strong one. I had to be the one who made the hard choices because you were too weak to do it." My mother recoiled as if she had been struck physically. "We chose her?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Mallory, we gave you everything. We let you run this family." "You let me carry it," Mallory yelled. "And when she got in the way, I had to move her. It is basic logic." "That is enough," Klein said, signaling the officers. But before they dragged her out, Klein reached into her bag. She walked over to the coffee table where my mother's reconciliation tea was getting cold. She placed 3 items on the polished wood. First, the jagged, frosting-smeared wooden dowel in the evidence bag. Second, a tablet playing the looped footage of Mallory driving my head into that wood. Third, the printed guardianship papers Mallory had tried to force me to sign in the study. "Look at them," Klein commanded my parents. "Stop looking away. That is not a prank. That is a weapon. That is a premeditated attack. And that paper? That was her attempt to legally erase your other daughter so she could sell your mother's legacy to cover her own theft." My mother looked at the wooden stake. She looked at the video of my head snapping back. She collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. The denial finally broke. There was no way to spin this. There was no misunderstanding. There was only the brutal mathematical reality of malice. My father looked at me. His eyes were hollow. "Alexis," he said, his voice trembling. We didn't know. We thought—" "You knew I was hurt," I said, my voice quiet but filling the room. "You knew I was scared, but it was easier to tell me I was crazy than to admit she was dangerous." "We can fix this," he pleaded, the old reflex kicking in. "We can get her a lawyer. We can—" "No," I cut him off. The single word stopped him dead. "I am not doing this anymore," I said. "I am not smoothing this over. I am pressing charges. I am testifying, and I am leaving." Mallory was screaming obscenities as they hauled her out the front door, her heels dragging on the carpet she had claimed she would inherit. The flashing blue lights from the cruiser swept across the living room walls, illuminating the family photos where we all looked so happy, so fake. "You are breaking this family!" My mother wailed into her hands. I looked at her, at the woman who had wiped blood off my face and told me to worry about the tablecloth. "I didn't break this family." "Mom," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying for 32 years. I just stopped being the glue. I walked out past them. I didn't look back. The aftermath was not a movie trial. It was a series of quiet, bureaucratic victories. Mallory pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of assault with a deadly weapon and fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence, largely because the evidence was insurmountable. She was sentenced to 4 years in a state facility, followed by mandatory psychiatric treatment and 5 years of probation. The judge issued a permanent no-contact order. She is not allowed within 500 feet of me for the rest of her life. The financial investigation was messier. My father had to sell the house in Ashford to cover the debts Mallory had racked up in his name. The bridge loan she had taken from the developer was illegal, and it dragged him into a mire of fines and legal fees. He lost his status. He lost his club membership. He lost the illusion of control. I did not stay to watch the fall. I moved 3 states away, to a small city near the mountains where the air is clean and nobody knows my last name. I spent the first 6 months in physical therapy, retraining the muscles in my neck and fixing the alignment of my jaw. I spent another year in dental reconstruction to repair the microfractures in my teeth from the impact. But the real work was internal. I saw a therapist who specialized in familial trauma. We didn't talk about forgiveness. We talked about calibration. I had to learn how to trust my own body again. When I felt dizzy, I had to learn that it was okay to sit down, that it wasn't a moral failing. When I felt angry, I had to learn that it wasn't a sin. I kept the lake house. I didn't sell it. I placed it into a permanent conservation trust, exactly as my grandmother had intended. It is a bird sanctuary now. Nobody can build condos on it. Nobody can cash it out. It just exists, wild and untouchable. I started a new job in compliance, but my passion became something else. I used the settlement money from the civil suit against Mallory. Yes, I sued her, and I took every penny she had hidden away to start a nonprofit called the Clear Line Boundaries Project. We run support groups for adults who are breaking free from toxic family systems. We teach them about financial independence, legal rights, and the subtle language of gaslighting. I tell them my story. I tell them about the cake. I tell them about the dowel. But mostly, I tell them about the silence and how breaking it is the only way to breathe. I have limited contact with my parents. We email on holidays. They send short, polite updates about the weather and their new, smaller apartment. They never mention Mallory. They never mention the dinner. They are still waiting for me to apologize for ruining the script. But they know now that I never will. On the wall of my new living room, right next to the window that overlooks the mountains, I hung my graduation cap. It is the only souvenir I kept from that life, sometimes. When the morning light hits it, I remember the taste of blood and sugar. I remember the pain, but then I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that belongs only to me. The day my sister smashed my face into a cake, I thought I was being humiliated. I thought it was the end of my dignity. But looking back, I realize it was something else entirely. That was the day the illusion finally cracked, and the truth, sharp and undeniable, rose up to set me free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe while cooking dinner? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about people taking back their power, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, and remember, you are allowed to be the one who writes your own ending.